Logo design is often called brand identity because the logo is a mark, a symbol, a typographic shape item that represents a product, a service, or a brand. So we often call logo design also brand identity. That's not to be confused with the word branding. Branding is a different subject. Branding, it refers to video, refers to writing, refers to photography, refers to a broader range of subjects. Brand identity refers specifically to the design of the mark that represents the business. So you see brand identity, you see logos everywhere because we're all consumers and we're buying products and we're watching television and we are looking at these things and we want to give things a name, but we also want to remember a single image to represent that name. So when we look at something like a Disney logo, we immediately get a sense of its personality and its subject matter, and it's just sort of lightheartedness because of the characteristics of the way that logo was designed. So it captures an emotional level just by the way that the design of those letter forms are created. And in the case of Walt Disney's logo, we know that this is based on his signature mark, his hand, which tells you something a little bit about the business, about the brand, that it's from the hand of an artist, that its origins come from the hand of Walt Disney. A great logo should also have a single distinguishing mark. So something that would not be confused with another business, would not be misconstrued to meaning something other than what its intentions were. So if we look at the famous Nike swoosh here, there's definitely an origin story behind the Nike swoosh logo, that it's based off of the wings of the Nike God's shoe. It's also a mark that was designed by one of their freelance designers. And although there was great thought behind the meaning of it, that if we look at it from just a form base or just the shape of it, it seems kind of simple. And logos should be simple, but they should also have great meaning behind them and a great purpose behind them, not just an abstract mark to call it a symbol. Great logo is not just an illustration of what the company makes or does. So obviously Starbucks does not sell mermaids. That's not what they do. But if you learn about the origins of Starbucks and the location that it was that the business started in, you'll understand the significance of the mermaid as both a personality and as a distinguishing mark for the business. And now we remember it for that reason. One of the things that's interesting about the Starbucks logo is there's a couple great web articles about its transformation over the years and how it's evolved. And as the symbol becomes more and more familiar to a wider audience, we can show less and less and less of the mermaid. And eventually the Starbucks logo will basically be a star because we keep zooming in to the core ingredient of it. But it always has some sort of meaning and purpose and origin behind it to represent what that business wants to reflect in its personality. Great logo should be interesting, unique, and timeless. That Apple logo has been around for several decades now, and it hasn't really changed. And there's distinguishing characteristics about it, obviously the bite and the little leaf in the corner, and it can be transformed each generation to include a different execution. So when we look at this mark, it's a white logo on a black background. But in the 90s, that white shape was filled with rainbow. And in the 2000s, that white shape became more rendered and polished and metallic to represent the personality of the age and what the audience was, what they were interested in, what was appealing to them. But the shape never changes. That distinguishable shape is what we remember more than the the rainbow or the polished metal. A great logo has the ability to define a belief system and 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 signal affiliations or loyalties. So now when we see this Amazon logo, there's obviously a great concept behind it, from the smile to the from A to Z to the friendliness and the soft nature of the typeface that was chosen. And all of these decisions that designers make are conscious decisions. They're not arbitrary. This typeface was designed to be soft and rounded, and you'll notice lowercase, because we want it to be friendly and approachable and not commanding or demanding. So even the type case, whether it's all caps or upper and lowercase, will help define the personality. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of different typefaces and different kinds of logos just to get your feet wet. When you take your graphic design classes with Stephen and other instructors on your campus, you'll also be introduced to other approaches for logo design. In our class, we're going to focus specifically on typographic marks, but I just want to give you just a bit more foundation on the logos themselves. So the logo, the mark, the symbol, the brand identity is made up of one or two elements. Obviously, you have type that states the name of the business, like Disney, but you can also have an image, and that image could be a symbol, an abstraction, a picture, like a mascot. Let's go to our next page. The logo, if it's solely typographic, here are a few examples. When we look at the Kellogg's logo, the initial K can also be used as a mark for their brand identity, but the full logo is all typographic. There are no other items, no other objects that are necessary. And we generally call this a typographic or a signature mark, depending on the characteristics of the typography. We can look at Harrods, which looks like it's handwritten, Kellogg's, again, that looks like it's handwritten, and Ford, but Microsoft is a sans serif typeface, like an Avenir or an Arial. And then there's been a little customization down here to make it unique and not simply letters on a page that are typed out. The logo mark, when it's typographic, can be further broken down into two categories: the word mark and the monogram. So here's a few other examples of word marks. You're seeing everything from a script or cursive typographic design like Disney and Kellogg's and Pinterest, but you're also seeing word marks, right? Word mark, that are based on a typeface, or sans serif italic, right? This is like a new house. You can see a block sans serif or a serif. Look at that G. We know that's not Adobe Garamond because that G is not Adobe's. We also know it's not Baskervilles. So investigating what typeface this might have been derived from could be interesting to do. But these are all word marks. And sometimes the word mark might have an object or a shape, like the little cut here, or the arrows, or the sun, or the pin, or the reversed arrow in here and the EX. Word marks could have some element that distinguishes them from typesetting, but sometimes it could just be the design of the letter forms themselves that give it its unique personality. The second category is monogram. And monogram is something that you might think of when you think of high fashion, or you might think of personal stationery. But the one thing about a monogram that's great is you can use them super, super small, and they can be instantly recognizable because of the distinct letter combination. So these two arrows that make the S, we have a little error here in the the preview. That should not be white right there. The Q, that looks like a speech bubble. The M for the golden arches. And a monogram could be one letter, like the T for Toyota or the W for Wiener Schnitzel, or it could be multiple letters, like the DQ and the LG, and then the interlocking C's for Chanel. What's interesting about monograms is, again, when we look just at the typefaces chosen, they evoke some sense of the personality. You may not understand what the product is per se, but you do get a sense of what the personality of this business and this brand is. Curvilinear indicates softer, more family oriented businesses. If it's, this feels very sci-fi, very futuristic because of its rendering, but also because of these oval elements that tends to feel a little bit more futuristic or technology based. And the interlocking C's, very classic for fashion, is to work with interlocking letter forms. When we're working with a fashion brand like Gucci and Prada and Chanel, they create a pattern that can be reproduced on garments and in fabric. A&W, again, very simple monogram. The typesetting of this is, there's nothing that's been altered or modified to it, but it's interesting to look at the Q for Quiznos and then the A for A&W and how similar they are in a lot of ways. Besides the color, there's some similarities between them that people might think that they're related, or they might confuse the two brands with each other if they aren't more conscious of the subtleties of the design.